Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday morning chat today is going to be a bit of all sorts, but today I'm actually watering my normal pots, all of them. But I'm not doing them all at once. In one session I will have breaks. But what I propose to do is pick on things that we just don't film. Obviously when you're running an orchid channel, you film things as they come into bloom or as they're in full bloom. That's the sort of main process. So unless something's in bloom, and that will include some that haven't bloomed, they just don't get filmed. So I'm going to try and pick on some oddities as we sort of go round today. Most of my potted orchids, I would say the majority, are in the Oncidium alliance, and at the moment I've got a Sharry baby spike and what I think is another Sharry baby spike, so I'm going to have to make an apology. When I split up the Peter Comp and the Sharry babies and potted them up as sort of divisions and things like that, in the last giveaway I've got a horrible feeling that somebody's got a Peter Comp division labelled as a Sharry baby division, which is not quite the same thing. Luckily they're both fragrant, but they don't look anything like each other. And the reason I think that is what I've got left. Now there's a pot that's definitely got a Peter Comp label in it, but it's also got a spike on it that looks like a Sharry baby spike to me. And then I've got another pot with Peter Comp, which is, I believe, Peter Comp, and I would like to keep one. So if that's the only one I've got left, then there's somebody waiting for a Peter Comp that may not get one. Mistakes happen, I'll apologise, but I think a couple of plants may have got muddled in that repotting and dividing session. I'm not sure yet, but the spike that's coming up doesn't look like a Peter Comp spike to me. Looks more like a Sharry baby spike. But yeah, so a few oddities, a few things that either haven't bloomed for a while or haven't come into bloom yet that we just never look at as a consequence, and a chat about those. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I've had to block somebody on my channel. And not because they were being rude or anything other than they were just being what I consider to be a pest. You know, I'll answer questions in comments on my videos, you know that only too well, and I'm only too willing to help. But this particular individual pestered me for weeks and weeks on end in Messenger on Facebook. That was before I put it over to a closed group. And now they've started on the YouTube channel, and it's all about feed and watering. And I've given the answers in the clearest possible way I possibly could. And then like a couple of days later, they're asking the same question again. So they obviously haven't gone and read the answer that I spent ages giving. And I said, you've already asked this, and I've already answered it. So they've repeated the question. Now, I've only got so much time to spend, you know. That one was pushing it beyond what I'm prepared to tolerate. So it's a very rare event, but, you know, and not for the sort of reasons I would imagine, but as I said, there's only so much time I can spend on my comments. And one person can't dominate, if you see what I mean. To spend the amount of time that that person was demanding, others wouldn't get the time. And that's not fair. Everybody gets the same share, sort of thing. I mean, some comments are easy to answer. Some involve a whole paragraph, sometimes with a little bit of research. I'm happy to do that, but not for the same person constantly repeating the same questions over and over again when I've given perfectly clear answers. So, if that was you, sorry, but that's the way it goes. Right, first one I want to look at, plants. Stop waffling, Roger. First one I want to look at is this one. This is the, well, it was Bulbophyllum, it's now Dinemma. Sorry, it was Epidendrum. It is Bulbophyllum, but it's now a Dinemma Bulbophyllum. This one is romping away. It is a climber. It's on a mount, so it can climb, but a while ago I split this up into lots of little pieces and planted all the pieces on the mount, and they're already rocketing. You know, we got stuff like this going on, stuff like this going on. It's not actually in bloom at the moment. It had a single flower a while ago, but the leaves are taking off in all directions. The problem with that is it's already off its mount. It's difficult to control this one, but I'm happy with it on the grounds that the blooms are absolutely fabulous. They're not large, but you know, they are really good. So this one, I can quite happily say, on this mount, in my environment, grows like a weed. I wish all my orchids grew like weeds. I'd love a house full, a grow room full of orchids growing like weeds, but it's not the case in all cases. But this one is doing really well, and I'm just having a closer look, see if I can see any buds. There's some signs of some sheaths showing on some of the older bulbs, so we may get some more blooms down the line. But yeah, it does grow well. And quite honestly, it was grown in a pot once, and it wouldn't stay in there. It was out the sides in no time at all. So I thought, we'll try it on a mount, and we'll try and control it by separating it into lots of little plants, so they've all got to start again. Yeah, well, they've all started again and taken off. So I think you could grow this on a mount 1 metre by 1 metre, and it would still fill it up. Yeah, happy little plant, nice one. And the video today will stop and start on the grounds that I'm watering, and what I'll do is as I come across a plant I want to film and talk about, I'll put it to one side, and when I've got a few gathered together I'll switch the camera back on and we'll have another go. But that one gets us underway. I'll be back in a minute. I've pulled a couple off of, I'll do this a shelf at a time, and any that I find on the shelf I'll clump together because they need to go back to get out of the way to water the next lot, if you see what I mean. This was a gift not that long ago. It's actually a Miltonia, and the tag actually says Miltonia spectabilis, which is a species, hyphen hybrid. Well, which? But what it could mean is that it's spectabilis crossed with something else, and they don't know what the something else is. That does happen, you know, especially if you've got a large nursery or something or other. You suddenly find a plant forming a seed pod. Well, the plant that the seed pod's on, you know what that one is, but you don't necessarily know where the pollen came from. so you end up with like an unknown cross, but you at least know what half of it is. So this was a gift, and didn't have a very good root system at the time, but I'll see if I can get it out. This is the problem with the black pots. I thought it was going to be a problem watering them, but I just water through the black pot and it runs out the bottom, so I don't have to take them out all the time. But we do now have a lot of new roots just starting around the base. So this one's probably never been filmed before, but it's coming on. I think that came from Lynn, so if you're watching Lynn, it's coming on nicely. Can't remember why you didn't want it, maybe it was a division. But from, I think, if you don't count Miltonia Sunset, which although it is a Miltonia, it's quite a complex hybrid, I do have a couple of Miltonias, and over the last year I suddenly have a lot, and they seem to have come out of the woodwork. 3 of them are gifts. One came from Did it come from Alberto? Yes, one came from Alberto when he gave up his collection, so that one came from Italy. That one's from Lynn, just round the corner. And another one was bought as a present on the trip to Ridlington. So that's 3 new Miltonias that I didn't used to have. And now we've got Yappy Dog starting. That's really nice on a Sunday morning, isn't it? You know, people's day off from work when they nice lie in, let your dog out and let it bark. Oh, brilliant. Socially minded idea. Right, this one is my Tahitian dancer. This was repotted and split, and somebody else has got the other piece, which wasn't a bad sized piece, but obviously this is the mother plant. And when it was repotted, I was looking forward to the new growths getting going. Well, they're getting going nicely. Now we've got the fogger on. It's going to be one of those days, I can see. We've got 3 nice new growths pushing on, and a 4th one just started over here. So we've got 4 new growths on there, all of which should bloom down the line. And they will be staggered. I've got 1 advanced, 2 close behind, and 1 a long way behind. So we should have a blooming period that's quite long this time round. But coming on nicely, that one. Again, that would never be filmed. It's not a project plant, and it's not in bloom, so it would just sit there doing its thing. quietly. Right, I'll find some more. Right, I thought we'd have a look at the 3 new Miltoniopsis that I got that I was appalled to find were full of Fusarium. Well, they're still with us at the moment, but very little progress. These haven't got their proper names on, but I'll do the pop-ups. I put temporary names on them when I repotted them. So one's got yellow, one's got pink. So by default, this was the deep red one that had the almost black centre. Now, at the very base of this, I do have, whoops, wrong way, some signs of some new roots about to grow. I've got no signs of new growth, but what hasn't happened is no leaves have fallen, and it's not showing signs of desiccation, so it's hanging in there, but it really could do with some new roots. But there's a couple just starting, so that's that one. Now this one looks a bit of a mess. When the accident happened, it wasn't as obvious, but this is the one that the basket full of lava rock and Rhynchostylis fell on. It broke a spike and it looked like it had damaged some leaves. Well, the damage is now showing through where they were squashed and crushed. But luckily, this one's going to come off, and these two here are not looking good, and the spike that was in that area was just snapped. Again, I've got no signs of new growth, and on this one I have a few signs of new roots, but very few. But again, taking those damaged leaves to one side, because that was physical damage, it's hanging in there. It's just about hanging in there. Now, I don't know whether this will pick up on the camera, but in here, you look at that leaf, let's try and get it in shot. You probably won't be able to see this, but there are very, very faint signs of cold damage. Just very, very faint signs that these got a little bit too chilled at some point. And I suspect it was the time of year, given that our show was at the end of March, and these were probably posted from Jersey weeks before that. So their travelling could have had some pretty cold weather. There are any faint signs. I don't think the leaves are going to drop or anything. Anyway, the third one, which is the yellow one, perhaps will be again one day. This one, again, I've got no new growth showing yet, but I've also lost no leaves, and it's looking okay. I mean, if you just saw that as a plant, you'd think, oh, that's a nice healthy plant, isn't it? Well, it sort of is. But I mean, I know what lurks within, shall we say, which hopefully has been treated successfully. But it's now got to grow out of it, you know, and without new growths, there won't be any blooms. They will take a while to adjust, given the media they were in. They were in that finely chopped rock wool with some perlite, I think it was, and they were absolutely sodden when I've got them. They, you know, you could have wrung water out of that media. They were so wet, and it was so compacted that there was virtually no air in the pot. So they were not happy and lost most of their roots as a consequence. They've now got air around them, but they need some new roots to get down into it and get going again. I think they're going to make it, quite honestly, those three. They did cost a reasonable amount for me anyway, so I'd like to see them pull through. And at the moment, just having a look now in a bit more detail rather than just watering them and putting them down. Now somebody's going to ask, why are you watering your Miltoniopsis with the same feed level as your other plants? Well, I'm not. Everybody's getting a CalMag feed today. So we've got no high TTS levels, and a dose of calcium and magnesium will do these the world of good. They don't need much food at the moment. They only need enough food to keep them alive. They're not growing, you know, and they're not even producing new roots at the moment. But dose of calcium and magnesium won't do them any harm, so they can be watered in with the rest just for this one. When I'm doing my normal feed, which most of the time would be about 150 parts per million of the MSU, and because it's the growing season, I'd normally be adding the calcium nitrate in to bump up the nitrogen and the calcium, and that takes it up towards the 200. I wouldn't feed a Miltoniopsis at that level ever. that's a bit strong for these. These are very, very light feeders, and they hate any build-up of salts or anything going wrong in the pot, so always feed these lightly. Anyway, they're still with us, and they're not showing signs of going downhill, so I think they're going to make it, for which I am well pleased. I'll be back. Right, this one never gets looked at because it's at the back of the shelf on the floor, and this is a bit of a biggie. Cover up my ugly face. This is my Coelogene cristata, and it's the variety Lemoniana. It's got nothing to do with its colour. It was a Mr. Lemon who named it. Now this, in theory, has spikes all over it, but it's had these spikes all over it for some time now, and they are growing, but there's no sign of buds coming out the top yet. But this is what they look like. You know, these are definitely spikes, they're not new growths, and I do have quite a few. There's another one tucked in there. There's another one hanging out the side here. There's another one up here, another one hanging right out the side here on this piece that's escaping from the pot. So it's got spikes. Let's have a count. 1, 2, 3 over that side, 4, 5 or 6 spikes, but no sign of buds coming out the top of them yet, and they are very slowly growing, but it is slow progress. Most people that have got a Coelogene cristata have said goodbye to their blooms probably weeks ago, and yet I haven't even got mine yet. Anyway, there are spikes there, and if they all come out and do have a couple of blooms on each, that's going to be quite a little spectacle for me, because I think this one bloomed for me the first time last year. Anyway, we will see what it does. I mean, it grows well for me. I mean, I've got nice plump pseudo bulbs in the main. You know, these are prone to shrivelling pseudo bulbs, so keeping them nice and plump is the optimum goal. And the trouble is, they do need to be drier and cooler in the winter, but if you leave them too long without water and those bulbs shrivel, they get to a point where they will not plump up, and the goal is to never let them quite get that far without keeping them soggy, obviously. So watering these in the winter time is not so easy. Anyway, it needs some water now, so I'll give it some. So that's that one. This is a little Bulbophyllum. Again, it was a gift, and unfortunately it's mislabeled. So the label says it's Tingaburinum, but it isn't. This did bloom. That's how I found out it wasn't what it says on the label, because the blooms were quite different. Nonetheless, they were lovely little blooms, emphasis on the little. It's a tiny little plant. Now this put up 4 new growths all round the pot, and I was expecting them to bloom, but so far they haven't. So maybe they're not going to. But it's a lovely little plant, and it doesn't take up loads of room like certain Bulbophyllums that just won't bloom, whereas this one just has its own little place, and I'm quite happy to keep it. And one day it will bloom again. It has once, I don't see why it shouldn't again, but it doesn't look like it's going to do it on those latest growths. So we'll have to see how that one progresses. But it's a lovely little plant. It's got lovely healthy leaves, and the rhizomes on this Bulbophyllum aren't too long. They're about around a centimetre, so I should be able to wrap it round inside the pot and get a bush rather than dangling over the side. But we'll have to see how it progresses. But it's growing nicely. I'm pleased with it. But unfortunately it's not what it says on the tin. Next time it blooms, you can all run off and try and find out what it's called for me, but we need the blooms to enable us to do that. Not just blooms, although with Bulbophyllums you can get pretty close with just the blooms. You need the size, yeah? You also need the size of the plant, the size of the leaves, size of the bulbs, length of the rhizome. You can't just go on blooms a lot of the time. But we need some before we can do any of that. So that's that one. Now this one I'm showing because there's somebody on the Facebook group posted a picture of theirs with a question, possibly about potting, I can't remember. But I'd just like to show you why I thought your plant was so good, because I just cannot get this thing to grow. This is a Banfield Ara Gilded Tower Mystic Maze. And whoever showed that one on Facebook, I don't think I've ever seen such a good one, apart from when they sell them. They look good then, but mine went downhill badly. And this is a classic example of leaving an Oncidium type in its pot too long and losing the root system. And with a plant that's got really large pseudobulbs, they do go dark naturally, don't worry about that. That's a trait of this one. But that was its last growth, you know, quite pathetic, and tried to bloom. I stopped it, but yeah, it's been going downhill. But what we do have now is this. Oh, the sun's just come out, so we do have quite a strong new growth coming out, and look where it's coming from. This was the last growth over here. Now this one's coming out from quite an old bulb. This will be the next one to lose its leaves, I expect, but we do have a new growth at long last, and I'm hoping this one will grow and produce a good root system, and it's in fresh media, so it's got every opportunity now to start doing a bit better. I haven't seen the blooms on this for years and years. I think the first time when I got it, it was in bloom, and in those days, if something was in bloom and I just bought it, I would leave it thinking, well, it's come from a nursery, so the media's going to be fine, isn't it? I don't make those assumptions anymore. But this one suffered as a consequence, started to recover, and then I did it again. So we're not infallible, none of us are. But this one's struggling, but we'll see how that new growth goes. At least it's growing something, which is more than it's done for a while now. Suppose we'd better have a look at this one. This is my one and only Cymbidium, and that's not going to change, trust me. And I've only got this one because I'm obliged to look after it. You've heard the story before, but it grew one nice new growth last year, which bloomed. That's just finished blooming now. The year before it grew one new growth and it bloomed, but it bloomed with 2 spikes. This winter only 1 spike, yeah? But what we do have is a nice new growth, and this one is far more developed than its predecessor at this time of year, last year, yeah? So this is quite far advanced. But I thought I'd show this now, because this is, once we get past this weekend, we've got threat of a frost. But once we get past this weekend, this will go out in the garden, so we won't see it again till it comes in the autumn. Hopefully by then it might have some spikes showing, or spike at least. But yeah, this has got to grow on, so this lives out in the garden during the summer. Gets some morning sun, and that's it. It's then sort of shaded by the shed basically for the rest of the day. It lives in behind the bonsai up against the shed, but it likes the morning sun. But, so that's my Cymbidium, no ID, pretty blooms, and yeah, out in the garden for you any minute now. Right, now this one is my only antelope type Dendrobium. It's quite a tall plant. When I bought it, it looked wonderful, and it had 2 lovely new growths that pushed on, grew some nice leaves, and then the heat wave had it last year, and with the lower humidity because of all the extractor fan and everything, it lost a lot of leaves. It's only got 1 growth left with leaves on, but it did try and push up a new growth down here during the winter, which stalled. That didn't grow. So I was envisaging losing this, but you know, they always say never give up with a Dendrobium. So what we got now is we've got new growth here, we've got 2 coming out here, and another swelling there, and quite honestly I think there's swellings in other places. So this always was a good plant, and it just didn't survive that heat wave. But if those 3 definite new growths can get going now and produce some more roots, there are signs of new roots coming out under here, this will take off again, and it won't get the higher light that it had last year. And obviously this year I've got the humidity, so if I can get those growths going, it should do quite well. Never bloomed yet, we shall see. And this one never gets looked at for the same reason. It's right at the back of a shelf. This is my only Maxillaria now, and this is Maxillaria sophronitis. and it was on a mount and it kept growing off the mount, so I thought we'll try it in a pot. Well, now it's grown out of the pot. It's another one of those, there's no controlling the flipping thing. It would normally just grow up a tree, where unless it reaches the sky it's got plenty of room. But its normal progression is quite long rhizomes. Let's get one out the side so you can see. And then it produces a bulb, and then it'll often branch twice from that point and then produce some more bulbs near the top. So you can see this is progressing. I mean, if you take this bulb here, where's my camera, a bulb there, progressed in two directions, produced a bulb there and a bulb there, and it's now growing twice out of both of those. So where there was one, there's going to be four. So it's getting bigger all the time. Now, I've got this one out for two reasons. One, we don't look at it often, and if you look carefully you will see some yellowing. Yeah. Now, in places those are oldest leaves, so I don't worry about those, but not all of them. There's some signs of a little bit of yellow in places, and I've got a little group of plants that have got paler leaves than they should have. It's a classic sign of a magnesium related issue. I won't say a deficiency, because magnesium is one of those funny ones, and even though you might have sufficient magnesium for most of your plants in your feed, like my MSU fertilizer, some plants need that little bit more. Yeah. And you've also got potential issues depending on your media, that your pH might not be suitable to get all that magnesium in there and get it to work. So I've ordered some magnesium sulfate, Epsom salts basically, so that they can get a dose, and with that in a soluble form, that can be used as a foliar feed as well, to get like an instant dose in there, and it can go in on its own, and if it's given as a foliar feed as well as a root feed, it should act quite quickly. So it will either solve the problem or it won't, but it will be relatively quick to find out, and for something that was only a couple of quid on eBay, it's worth a try. Some of my Oncidium types have got very pale coloured leaves, some of my Miltonias. Now it can just be too much light, or just the right amount of light, and that's their normal colour. You've got to weigh these things up before you start dosing up with various chemicals to try and solve a problem when that might not be the problem. So you need to do your homework first. But yeah, you can get too much magnesium into plants and it will form a lockout with some of the other nutrients. So it's not something you should overdose on, but a real stimulating boost of it now and again can work wonders. So we will give that a try. This one blooms on and off with very pretty little red flowers, but it hasn't bloomed through the winter. I think it had one, maybe two blooms through the winter, but it's producing a hell of a lot of new growth. So maybe we'll get a mass blooming down the line. But it grows well for me, and it blooms on and off. But as I say, there's a little bit of yellowing in places that is not necessarily on oldest bulbs. So we'll give that a dose of magnesium and see what that does for it. And as I said, that can be mixed up as a foliar feed and get it straight into the leaves. It dramatically affects the ability for the plant to produce chlorophyll. That's what gives them their green. And obviously if they're going down in that area, then they're not photosynthesizing as well as they should be, which will affect everything. So it is quite important, but it's also important not to stonk it up too much and overdose, because of the effects it can have on other nutrients. So we'll see what it does on that one. So keep our eye on that one specifically, and I'll choose a couple of the Miltonias and Oncidiums, and when the stuff arrives, because I've only just ordered it, we'll give them a dose and keep a close eye on them and see what effect it actually has. I'll have to work out how strong to mix it up as well. So I've got a bit of work to do because it's something I've never had. I've always relied on the amount of magnesium that's in the MSU feed, which is a balanced feed, but not always suitable for every single orchid throughout the year. Yeah, but I do use CalMag, which is what everything's getting today. But again, that's not a huge amount of magnesium going in there, and it's certainly only going in at the roots, not on the plant. So that's that one, and its associated problem, which will be worked on shortly. Now, once upon a time, this was a giant brassica on a mount, and it grew away from excuse me, grew away from the mount. Excuse me. And the roots dried out as aerial roots. So I put it in a pot, took the old part of the plant off, and it stalled badly. But we do have a nice new growth coming now, and more importantly for this one, because it should have a vigorous root system, we do have the start of roots showing down in the pot. Not many, but some. And I put quite a bit of moss around the base of that new growth because it wasn't showing any signs at all of new roots. Well, it is now. With new roots, this should go on and mature. I don't expect it to be as big as the previous bulb, but it should go on and mature. If it attempts to bloom, it'll get stopped, and the next one will be the one that will get the blooms on again. So quite a long-term project, this one. It's Brassica Chieftain Ludlow's, which has got Varicosa in it. Smashing blooms on it, absolutely enormous. I haven't seen them for a while because of what's been done, but it's coming back. And once I've seen these roots like this with their root tips getting down, they're quite a long way from the growth itself. So they're already 2 inches long, and they branch. So we do have the establishment of a new root system. So we will see these blooms again down the line. Quite honestly, they're pretty something. This was a gift as well. So seems to be quite a few of these lying around. I think people are going to have to stop sending me plants because I've got enough now, thank you. Not being rude, but you know, there's a limit. So anyway, that one's coming on. Doing well, or pushing on, I'll say. Not doing well yet, but it will do. I can now safely say this one will grow on now. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that point now because I've reached a point that's definitive, if you know what I mean. I've basically gone all around there and right down through that lot. So what's left to do is round here, and there are a lot of holy clay pots there that are not in this session, and yeah, so we'll do those another time. And in amongst those are some project plants, which we've, you know, I want to keep those separate. So thanks for joining me with my morning coffee. Well, unbeknown to you, that's number 3 since I started filming. I do have breaks. And we'll do this again. You know, next time I water the pots, because I need to finish these off just because I've got to that corner. I've still got to carry on watering, but I don't want to carry on filming. So next time I'm watering the ordinary pots, we'll start there and move round through those as another session, which might be quite nice. And I've got a few surprises for tomorrow's video, which I'm deliberately standing in the way of one of them because it's the last plant off of that top shelf, and the blooms have just opened basically. So I've had to rearrange things. Where I got the project plants out yesterday, they all went back in the wrong place because I just wanted them out of the way after I'd filmed. So that whole section needs rearranging, and this particular plant is right at the back, and now that the blooms are coming out, it needs to come somewhere where we can see it. So I've got to rearrange that whole section, and there's something else lurking over that side of my shoulder as well, which is going to be pretty special tomorrow. It's not fully open yet, so I don't want to do one of those previews for that one. I want that one fully open because it's first time bloomer and not what I was expecting. It's pretty special. So some things for tomorrow, and thanks for dropping by. See you next time. Bye for now.